Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Sean. On this episode, we are going to be talking about all the major Bears shakeup and the ensuing press conference, a little NFL Hall of Fame voting information, some hot stove, hockey, and more. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. So head on over to icehogs.com, get yourself a hat, shirt, jersey, tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex. A lot happened since the last episode.
Absolutely, and I've been really itching to do this episode because of set events that took place on New Year's Day / Black Monday, and I'm sure you've been wanting to talk as well.
Absolutely, and I would say this is probably one of the most anticipated episodes. I got a lot of messages of people saying, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, and having questions about some of the potential head coaching candidates. So I think this is going to be a good one.
Yeah, a lot of people are actually talking to me about it too. They were asking me when we were going to talk about it, and I said, well, today's the day, so ready for this.
I want to start, jump into the Bears, but there's one topic I want to talk about first. Okay. And I've been hearing numerous people, mostly non-Bears fans and national media types, and they're doubting the resume for first ballot Hall of Fame for Brian Urlacher. I think it's at this point, I think everybody knows that Brian Urlacher is up for the Hall of Fame this year, and he was named one of the finalists along with Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, Ray Lewis. I forget who else. But Brian Urlacher is one of the finalists. And I just think it's crazy to think that Brian Urlacher is not considered the first ballot Hall of Famer.
I think it's crazy too. And you know what? It was really nice to hear Aaron Rodgers say that he was a first ballot Hall of Famer and that he was one of his favorite players ever. I think some people, in my opinion, are so judgmental of a player based on if they won a ring or not. And obviously Brian Urlacher came close twice, but it never happened. And I can't help but wonder if some people are just kind of strung on that whole, he didn't win a championship thing, so is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? I don't know what some of the people's reasoning is, but I mean, when I watched that guy play, he was one of the most talked about defensive players in football throughout pretty much that playing decade he had. I don't think there's much more to say than Brian Urlacher was just amazingly great.
Yeah, I mean, from the get-go, I still remember where I was when I read about them drafting Brian Urlacher. This was back in the days before it was on TV. The day after the draft, you read about who they drafted in the newspaper. And I was a little disappointed. He wasn't the guy I wanted. I'm even forgetting who I wanted. It was probably somebody stupid that was terrible. But I was like, there's a safety that they're going to convert to linebacker. I'm like, oh, God. And they were a bad defense the year before the Bears drafted him. They were, I think, like 29th in the league, something like that. When they drafted Urlacher, they actually started him at outside linebacker, and he struggled. They ended up replacing him with Roosevelt Colvin, good old Rosie Colvin.
That's a name.
And Barry Minter was actually the starting middle linebacker. He got hurt, and Urlacher ended up replacing him at middle linebacker, and he ended up finishing the rookie year with 101 solo tackles, 24 assists, 8 sacks, 2 interceptions, and a fumble recovery, going on to become defensive rookie of the year. And then it just went uphill from there.
Look at all the times that he terrorized Brett Favre. I think one of my favorite all-time Brian Urlacher highlights was the pick 6 he had against him. Was that 06, 07, 05, somewhere in there? But it's one of my favorite highlights.
Yeah. So a 13-year career, over 1,000 solo tackles, over 300 assists, 11 fumbles. Forced 11 fumbles, recovered 15 fumbles, 22 interceptions, 85 passes defended, 8 Pro Bowl appearances, first team All-Pro 4 times, and was Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. One of my most favorite games was I think it was 2001 when he was shadowing Mike Vick in a game and absolutely shut him down. And this was Michael Vick was just running for 100 yards a game. Urlacher held him to just 18 yards rushing, and even scooped up a Vick fumble and took it 90 yards for a touchdown. And people were just astonished that this guy could do that, could stop Michael Vick. That was just one of my favorites, moments.
Yeah, it was really, really cool to watch him play. It's hard to believe that there are a lot of doubters out there for him, but I've said my piece about him, and I don't think there's anything more to say. I just think it's too bad.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that sucks is he's up against people that are also first ballot Hall of Famers. Like Terrell Owens, it was a shame that he wasn't put on in the first ballot, because he's arguably the second best wide receiver ever to play the game behind Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
And I watched him play, and he was just phenomenal. He could just take over a game. And, his stats, if you look at the record of a team when he went there versus before he was there and after he left, it was just astonishing what he could do. And the reason they didn't put him in was just because of he was a total locker room cancer and complete Looney Tunes. And that's the reason they didn't put him in. It had nothing to do with his on-field play.
Right. Yeah. I heard about all that stuff. Obviously, I can't really speak for all the other people around him because, I wasn't in there, but I know sometimes that does have an effect when it comes to these things.
I lived in Philadelphia at the time when he played for the Eagles. And there was one story where apparently he got in a fight with, I'm trying to remember who it was. I'm drawing a blank. I just remember the defensive player's nickname was the Badasseter.
I love that nickname.
And they got into a fight in the locker room, and T.O. was apparently like buck naked, like wearing nothing. And they started to get into a fist fight, and T.O. ran back to his locker room, put on his boots, and ran back to fight him. He didn't put any clothes on, just put his boots on.
Oh my gosh.
That is there's such a funny story. Like there was so many stories like that. But the finalists for the NFL Hall of Fame this year, Tony Baselli, Isaac Bruce, Brian Dawkins, Alan Faneca, who we talked about before, how he lost all that weight, Steve Hutchinson, Joe Jacoby, Edgerrin James, Ty Law, Ray Lewis, John Lynch, Kevin Mawai, who coincidentally enough is during Coronas Grassu's rookie year, the Bears brought Kevin Mawai into training camp to give him some pointers. Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Brian Urlacher, Everson Walls. And think about that is the absolute first ballot locks there. Ray Lewis, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Brian Urlacher.
Yeah, that's
like those are the absolute locks.
Yeah, I mean that's quite a group of guys.
Yeah, I mean there's some very good players in there. I mean, I watched Brian Dawkins from probably 99 to 2008. And he was great. I would put him in. Tony Baselli, I would put him in. Joe Jacoby, I would put him in, but not over a Ray Lewis, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, or Brian Urlacher.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you on that one. When I saw that Brian Urlacher was a finalist, I just got an update on my phone. I looked at the other guys because they tell you on the ESPN app, and I just looked at that group and I'm like, man, I mean, this is kind of cool to see because these are the guys I grew up watching, and now they're on the verge of being inducted into the Hall of Fame. It kind of feels weird.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember like when I was at that point when the guys that I grew up watching were inducted into the Hall of Fame. I mean, Joe Montana and Jerry Rice and Dan Marino, and you're like, wow, this is so cool because you get to see that, and you only get to see that once when the guys you grew up with go in. So it's a really cool experience, and I'm trying to capture some more of that when Urlacher gets inducted because when it's a guy that was one of your favorite players gets to go in, it was a really cool experience.
Who was the last Bear to be inducted into the Hall of Fame? I can't remember.
Hampton?
Might have been.
I think it was Hampton.
I'm curious now. I'll look it up.
Yeah. So, when they do the ceremony, I actually might go to Canton. I always kick myself because my three all-time favorite baseball players were Andre Dawson, Ryne Sandberg, and Cal Ripken. All three made the Hall of Fame, and I never went to Cooperstown for the ceremony. And I was just like, why didn't I? It would have been so cool. My wife actually went to the Baseball Hall of Fame when Gary Carter got inducted. She still got like a lapel pin, and she said it was really cool. I'm like, man, why didn't it go when my favorite players are? So I'm like, now that Urlacher is going to go in, I might go out. It's not that far away.
By the way, the latest inductee who was mainly a Bear in his career, who was in the Hall of Fame, was Richard Dent.
Oh, yeah.
Hampton
Richard
was
Dent.
before, right after Mike Singletary, Finks, and Payton.
Yeah. Okay, Richard Dent. Yeah, that's right. I should have remembered that.
Because there were two
Dent.
Hall of Famers after that. Orlando Pace, he was only here 1 year. And Dick Stanfel, offensive line coach, was also in other places as well.
Yeah, Orlando Pace was here in body, but not in mind. It was bad. I don't know if you remember the Orlando Pace failed experiment.
Yeah, I remember him being here. I just don't remember much, probably because I kind of blocked it out of my memory. Because there are some players you just kind of big names. They just kind of forget we're on your team towards like the end, and that obviously it didn't work. I just kind of remember him being on the team. I don't remember him really doing much.
Oh, he was bad. I was so excited when they signed him. I'm like, I know he's old, but he was so good. and it was just like bottomed out, just terrible. Like it made me scared to ever sign like an older veteran ever again.
Yeah, and he signed a 3-year deal, which I did not remember. Yeah,
I don't think he made all.
Oh
3
no,
years.
he just played in 2009. That was it. He got hurt against the Vikings. The loss in Minnesota in November. Then didn't play again.
Yeah, that's how I sort of remember it, is injury and then never really came back.
And by the time he signed, like you said, it was at the end of his career. Like you said, the guy's a Hall of Famer, but 2009, he would have been in his early mid 30s.
I think he might have been in his mid 30s.
Yeah, sounds about right.
But onward and forward is, so Black Monday, which was New Year's Day this year, we saw our least favorite Bears coach of the last 3 years, John Fox, get fired. And not only was he fired, but Vic Fangio's contract expired. So he is a free agent.
And I'm hearing reports that they're really trying to get him back.
Yeah, you know what? I've heard that too. But it's an interesting tightrope to walk, because if you're going to bring in a new coach, they're going to want to bring in their own guys, and you can make suggestions, but it's, you have to sort of woo Vic Fangio again, make him want to come back at the same time where you're trying to sell Vic Fangio on your new head coach, and then make it all work. So it's a bit of a dance that you have to do. So it's not going to be easy. And if Ryan Pace pulls it off, I'll be really impressed, because, you have to balance Vic Fangio's desire to be a head coach. I think they did the first step was correct. And the very first interview they did for head coach position was Vic Fangio.
Well, my kind of opinion is, shouldn't they hire the head coach first before worrying about that? I mean, because if you hire a head coach and he wants to bring in his own guys, I mean, then what? Am I missing something here? Because it was just my impression that Vic Fangio, in his fate here in Chicago, would kind of be determined after the head coach was hired.
Typically what happens is your assistants are still under contract when the head coach gets fired, and you can either dismiss them right off the bat, or you typically.
Well, I'm just thinking of this because his contract was up.
Yeah, so this situation's a little weird because his contract ended at the same time as Fox got fired, and they want to bring him back. It's one of those things that I think they're going to try to sell him, because we'll talk a little bit later about some of the candidates, and not too long, but some of the candidates, and a lot of them are younger guys, or very offensive focused guys. And if you could bring them in and say, hey, listen, we already got a defensive guy that's just really well respected, and he already has command of the defensive players. It's going to ease your transition. A lot of guys might be willing to go for that.
Yeah.
Think of Sean McVay in Los Angeles. Is they brought him in, and they've kind of pushed what's his name, Wade Phillips. They were like, hey, listen, he's a veteran guy. He's got head coaching experience, a lot of defensive coordinator experience, and they brought him in, and it's been a very good match, because he can focus on the head coaching stuff, but also getting the offense in there, and kind of he trusts Wade Phillips to take care of the defensive side, and not have to worry about about that so much. And I think that would be, especially if they hire a certain head coach that I'm hearing that the Bears are leaning towards. I think that would be absolutely a marriage in heaven for the Bears.
I mean, that makes sense. My opinion, kind of going into this whole search process, was if Fangio stays, fine. If they go within another direction, as long as it works out, fine. Because I do like Vic Fangio, but I could understand wanting to bring in all your own guys. Like, I'd understand it. I wouldn't want to see anything forced, but if it's the match is right and all sides agree to it, then great. Absolutely. I think right now for me, there's just so much left to be questioned, and that's mainly who's going to be the next head coach. I think the next head coach is going to answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you is, some of the names that they've brought over are going to probably want to bring in their own defensive coordinator, especially some of the guys that have had head coaching experience, that have been in the league longer. But there's a couple names on there that are younger guys, and it's a big step up for them. And if that's the case, they may look at it as, hey, this is going to ease my transition. I don't have to win over the defensive side of the locker room. I can focus on winning over the offensive side, and that's my specialty.
Yeah, good. Sure.
Of course, if they bring in one of the defensive guys that they've interviewed, then yeah, they're probably not bringing Vic Fangio. But if they hire one of the offensive names, and especially one of the younger ones, there's a good chance that they might want a Vic Fangio.
Sure. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It kind of, like you said, it kind of depends on what direction they go here. And, we'll see when we find out what that is.
Yeah. I've also heard that the Packers are interested in Vic Fangio.
Yeah. Obviously they're moving on from Dom. They're making a lot of changes there in Green Bay. Ted Thompson is going to have another role, not as GM anymore. Aren't they pretty much kind of clearing the way of all their coordinators and just kind of keeping McCarthy? That's kind of my understanding.
Yeah, they had a bunch of in-house people that seemed like they were grooming to be potential GMs, and it looks like they're just bypassing those and looking outside the organization, which is weird. I'm curious to see how this shakeup affects the Packers, because it's a fairly big shakeup for that team. If it was with the Bengals or the Browns or, somebody like that, and they had a big shakeup like this, I mean, no big deal. It's par for the course. But if it's the Steelers or the Packers, then that's something you take notice of.
Well, yeah, especially since the Packers were kind of exposed this year as being a pretty terrible football team that was made to look really good by their quarterback. So obviously, if you get a new GM, a new mind in here, they can kind of do more to build up the team around him, whether it's defensively or offensive weapons and whatnot. So, yeah, it is going to be interesting and a little scary for us Bears fans, because it's like, well, we've had to deal with Aaron Rodgers making them good. Now, if they get even more good, that just makes it more difficult for us. But, that'll be interesting. The one thing I wanted to bring up really quick when it comes to coaching is, holy crap, the Raiders.
Yeah. Like I wasn't even going to mention it because the person they hired has been rumored for like the last couple weeks. So you knew that was coming, but the contract, holy. So those of you not, haven't paid attention in the last 24 hours, is the Raiders announced that they lured John Gruden out of the announcer's booth to be their head coach. And that's been rumored, like a pretty substantiated rumor, because they had already had his coordinators picked and blah, blah, blah. But then they announced it's going to be a 10-year, $100 million contract.
I mean, did you see the tweet that somebody said, I think it was one of the football writers or whatever, that said if the John Gruden thing doesn't work out, combination of what they owe him plus all the costs and the investments and whatnot for Vegas, that could put the Raiders in some really bad financial times.
I think, I mean, I haven't really stopped to think about it too much because I just saw it this afternoon. But my first impression is they moved to Vegas, not next season, the season after that, right? Or is it two more seasons?
2 more seasons, I think.
Okay, so after next season, that's when they'll start pushing season tickets really hard. They got to figure, all right, we're going to have a big name head coach who hopefully can get this team back righted, because not this season, but the season before that, they were a really good team that had a legit chance to go to the Super Bowl before the Derek Carr injury. And so, I mean, they're one season removed from being absolutely, a very good team. So, it's going to be a combination of getting the most out of their quarterback, which what Gruden, his claim to fame is. Also, he's a huge name, and you want to sell season tickets. You sell season tickets with a, big name, big face coach, and as long as players too, but having a personality like that is definitely helping you sell tickets when they move to Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it will work out for them in that retrospect. Even so, the contract is pretty ridiculous. And, Gruden is a very smart football guy. He has a very high football IQ. And think about it, he's respected by so many people in the game. It just, there's still a little bit of concern because he's been out of coaching for quite some time. And though he continues to observe, study, and understand the game, I just feel like there's a whole mental side of coaching that if you're kind of out of practice for a bit, that you might just kind of be quote unquote rusty, even though you have a great football mind. I just think there's many aspects of coaching, and this is just a hypothesis in my mind. I don't know anything about NFL coaching, but that's where I can see there being a little concern, is that the fact that he hasn't done this in a while, despite his everlasting knowledge of the game of football.
Oh, I mean, it has been a long time since he was a head coach. His last game for the Raiders was the famous snow game where they lost to the Patriots in the AFC division game, and that was 2002. That was his last one for the Raiders, and he was fired by the Buccaneers in 2008. 2008 is 2018.
Yeah.
It's a
decade. That's a
time.
full decade right there.
Yeah, so you're like, just think about it, is in the broadcast booth, what kind of hours is he working? Versus what kind of hours he's going to have to work as a head coach?
Oh, much, much more, I would assume.
Yeah.
It's a different lifestyle. It's an extremely different lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wonder if he's game for it. I don't know. We'll see. We got 10 years to watch him. The best is that the Raiders got rid of him via a trade.
Yeah.
When that happened, I was like, what? They traded their head coach? Wish we would have traded.
How many times has that honestly happened?
I can't think of too many times. But I wish they would have traded John Fox.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. But
so
as far as I'm concerned, Fox is in the rearview mirror now.
Yeah. Also in the rearview mirror is our old friend Dow Loggins. He was under contract still with the Bears, but I believe when they fired Fox, they gave him the ability to interview somewhere else. And he did with his old friend Adam Gase, and will be going to the Miami Dolphins as their offensive coordinator.
But isn't Gase still going to be calling the plays there offensively? Isn't that what people say?
I would imagine. I mean, Dow Loggins is probably just helping him come up with a game plan, and then Adam Gase is actually going to call the plays.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would imagine Dow Loggins is going to be a glorified quarterback coach.
Yeah, and Dowell Loggins is still pretty young, and despite how much he just drove me up a wall last year, I feel like if he spends more time in the coaching world, that he might turn into something one day. I just think really Dowell Loggins was kind of over his head last year. He wasn't ready for this, especially when you have so many young assets like the Bears do. So, I mean, this could do some good for him. You learn with a really good offensive mind, and you have some veterans on that Miami team. So it might do him some good. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some guys that rise to the occasion when they're so young and inexperienced and they step up, like Sean McVay. But there's other guys that just, they don't. And we'll talk about that a little more when we talk about some of the head coaching candidates. But with Dowell Loggins, Adam Gase also hired away the Bears offensive line coach, Jeremiah Washburn. And I am not going to be sad about him leaving because that offensive line stunk.
Yeah, it wasn't great. I mean, I know it's not all his fault. It was pretty banged up, but yeah, you're not going to keep your job either way. It's a performance-based business when that happens.
Yeah, so adios, Jeremiah Washburn. Adios, Curtis Modkins, the running backs coach. Adios, Dowell Loggins.
Yeah, just sweep them away. Out with the old, in with the new.
At least good thing is the Bears don't have to pay Dowell Loggins or Jeremiah Washburn now because they left on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So on to the head coaching candidates. The first guy that was interviewed was, we talked about, Vic Fangio. They interviewed him on Wednesday. And there's rules in the NFL about when you can interview guys, and you have to get permission if they're still under contract, and if their team is still playing, you can't interview them the week they have a game. So that's why the Bears, the way they chose some of the people they interviewed, like Vic Fangio is not on a team right now, so he's a free agent. They could interview him whenever, and they already had him in house. So he's a hell of a defensive coordinator, but he's older. He's not an offensive mind. And the problem with Vic Fangio is if you bring him in to be the head coach, you're going to have to bring in a really good offensive mind to be the offensive coordinator. And if they're too good, they will leave to be a head coach somewhere, and you have to start that search again and force Trubisky to be in another system.
Yeah. Now, didn't they say that the whole thing with Fangio was also kind of a formality as well to interview a coach in-house? Did I hear that right, or?
No, you don't have to do that. I mean, they didn't interview Dowell Loggins.
No, that's true. I mean, I don't know. Somebody said that, and I wasn't really sure what they were talking about, so I just thought I'd ask you about that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's somebody you respect, maybe, but I think I think it was done because Vic Fangio is somebody that they would love to have back as a defensive coordinator. If you disrespect him by not interviewing him as a head coach, odds are he's not going to come back. You got to make him. You got to make him really want to be there. And I think if you show him the respect of letting him interview for a head coaching job, plus being able to see through that defense that he's helping build, that's good steps.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. That's probably what they meant, and that's kind of what I thought they meant, but I figured I'd just kind of get that cleared up. I was also going to ask you this. How different do you think the circumstances could have potentially been with Fangio if they would have canned John Fox and let him coach the rest of the way? I mean, what do you think? I can't help but think about that.
That was something that I thought about when in the middle of the season. I was like, why? John Fox is going to be gone at the end of the year. There's nothing he can do to save his job at this point. So why not part ways and give Fangio the head coaching job? And on one hand, I'm like, it could be good because you gave him an opportunity Vic Fangio an opportunity to be a head coach, and he wants to be a head coach. But so on one hand, he could be very excited about the opportunity, but on the other hand, it could be a situation where he's, if you don't retain him as the head coach, he could just get up and leave and be mad about it. Like, well, what did I do wrong? And I was inheriting this situation, and you're judging me on a tough situation that, so it could go either way. And I think that's one of those situations. I don't know Vic well enough to gauge how he would be. I don't even know how I would react myself if I was put in that situation. I would like to think that I would be just glad for the opportunity and hope I could parlay it into a head coaching job. But I don't know how I'd be reacting if they told me, well, you did admirably, but we're going to go with somebody else.
Right.
That's a big ego jab.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated with that one there. Personally, I would have thought that it wouldn't have hurt to have tried last year, but again, that's in the rearview mirror. We just got to look at the candidates now. So it was just kind of a question of interest.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I don't know. It's hard for me to tell what I would do without it happening. So I can't imagine guessing about another person. So it could go either way. The second candidate they interviewed was the Panthers defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks. Mm-hmm. He's got a history with the Bears because he was an assistant to Ron Rivera. Has been assistant to Ron Rivera for a long time. No offensive experience, and he's only got 1 year as a defensive coordinator. Honestly, I think this is just a fulfillment of the Rooney Rule, which is basically the rule that you have to interview a minority candidate. I think that's kind of what this is.
It just, to me, I don't see how it would really benefit the Bears in what they're trying to do with Trubisky and the guys around him. I mean, Ryan Pace said that they were not really painting themselves in a quarter, his exact words, on offensive or defensive type minds. He was keeping their vision open, kind of their choices open, which I'm glad they're doing that. I'm glad they're not painting themselves in a corner, but I truly believe that they would favor an offensive mind over a defensive mind. And, not knocking Steve Wilks here, but it just, to me, it doesn't seem like the right fit.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to the point of, you sold your whole future to the McCaskey family saying, listen, I know I've had my ups and downs here, but I've got Mitch Trubisky. If that is how you're selling yourself and how you're mortgaging your future, then you better put him into a really good system, surround him with talent, and have consistency. And if you bring in a defensive coach, there's nothing wrong with a defensive coach. The problem is you have to rely somewhat on having a good offensive coordinator. And we see what happens when you've got too good of an offensive coordinator. Right. You lose them. They go somewhere else. And, I guess that's a good problem is if you're good enough that your assistants keep getting poached, it means you're a good team, but it's bad for continuity. And for a young quarterback, that's not a good situation.
No, exactly. I mean, the Bears are going all out on this Trubisky Pace thing. The Pace extension, which I'm sure you and I will talk about later, and Trubisky being the center guy, and Trubisky potentially being part of this interview process, which is a lot of pressure on the kid. But look, that just means they're going all out with this, and they're going to accommodate themselves with what they think is going to be best to go through all this. The Bears have been traditionally this ground and pound defensive team, but clearly if they're going out with all this, it's going to be a little different here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how they want to work this, is they think that no matter who they like on the team or who's the most talented player on the team, it doesn't matter, is they have the most important position and they think they've got the guy locked up, and they want to make sure that they build the team around him. And if Mitch Trubisky turns out to be the guy they think he is, then, you're going to be grateful that you built a team around him. And so
absolutely.
As far as like, and I would think that part of, him being part of the interview process, I think it's just going to be, he meets with the head coach, the candidate. They talk plays, they see if they're on the same page, and things like that. More so than he sits down in the interview and is asking him questions. I just think it's more of a kind of seeing the rapport.
Yeah, I mean, I get the fact that they want to kind of find the right fit for everything here, and it makes sense to me, despite the fact that there's a lot of pressure. But I don't know what's going to go on in those interviews. And these interviews, I have another thing I want to talk about this later. I'm sure we're going to touch on Ryan Pace's presser, but yeah, no, that's kind of what I've been thinking. And to me, yeah, it could be a lot of pressure on a kid, but if you got to make things work, you got to find the right fit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to make sure that it's a guy that, if you're bringing him in to groom this young quarterback, then it better be somebody that he gets along with and works well with. I mean, it's a much different situation than when Jay Cutler was here because he's so fickle. But still, you want a guy like, look at Carson Wentz. Is they talk about what a good rapport he has with John DeFilippo and Frank Reich and Doug Peterson. All three of them. He just has a really good rapport, and they work well together, and they have synergistic relationship. And you can even watch it on the sidelines when they're flipping through plays on the sidelines. It's like they're working together, and that's really what you want. Is you don't necessarily need the best guy at X's and O's. You need the guy that's going to be the best teacher and help develop a great game plan for, match your strengths versus the other team's weaknesses.
Plus, I feel like getting off on the right foot and establishing a good relationship goes a long way, because we've seen instances where quarterbacks and their coaches, whether it's their coordinators, head coach, whatever, we see them not get along, and that usually does not end well. So I guess if you have your young, big, important asset, you want to establish a really good relationship with whoever is going to be developing him and being the head honcho here.
Yeah, absolutely. While we were talking about the press conferences, let's just jump right into that. The Ryan Pace press
I really want to talk about this press conference.
Yeah, so the biggest news out of it is that Ryan Pace got a contract extension, and people are up in arms. And I basically say, who cares? Who cares? I mean, the thing is, if you extend his contract, then you can line it up to match the head coach.
That's why they did this.
Yeah, that you can line it up. That's a selling point for coaches, because they're like, well, I know the GM is going to be there. Because the thing is, even if you're doing a fairly decent job, if you're not contending for, if you're doing well enough that you feel like you're on the right path, but they still fire the GM, the new GM is just going to can you too. Is you want to match up. You want to match up with your GM, and you want a synergistic relationship.
Why do you want to go to a place where you're not sure if your boss is going to be around there?
Yeah. I mean, you signed on to be with that boss, not, anything else. Is you want to work for that organization, and that's your boss, that GM. And if you know that you got a 4-year contract and your GM's only got a 2-year contract, it makes you a little nervous. And ultimately, they could sign him to a 100-year contract. They can still fire him. They just got to pay him, and it's not our money. Who cares?
Yeah, I mean, the Bears have plenty of it, so, whatever. This is a big topic that I kind of wanted to talk about, because you read the papers the next day, and all you hear is, oh, Ryan Pace, sub 500 the past 3 years, but he gets rewarded with an extension. He is not being rewarded with an extension. This is a business move done for the exact reason that you and I just talked about. This is not saying, here you go, congratulations, here's an extension. This is a business move. I've said it once and I've said it again. They are going all out with Trubisky and Pace. Either this goes all the way and it works, or it goes nowhere and it doesn't work. But this is the path they've chosen. And we should be happy that they've chosen a path. And it's still pretty young in the path, even though Pace has been around for a while. Trubisky, the main guy, has only been here 1 year. So they have a lane that they're going to go in. We've seen before where the lane is kind of squiggly and it's gone in different directions. At least they're picking one here. So this is a pure business move, and this is why they're doing this. I know it's frustrating that we haven't seen results yet when it comes to winning games and going to the playoffs, but that's just the reality of it right now. And maybe this does work, maybe this doesn't work, but that's what they had to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, everyone loves to say, well, Ryan Pace and John Fox have the same record with the Bears, and it's whatever, 13-33 or whatever it is. But that's a little narrow view of things. Is number one is John Fox pretty much got forced onto Ryan Pace. They said, and I've heard multiple reports from people that have inside, Greg Gabriel. Greg Gabriel said this was basically it because he knows he has friends still in the building. Now, when the consultant, Ernie Accorsi, suggested Ryan Pace and they hired him, they also went and found a coach, and it was basically once John Fox got fired by Denver, it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to be brought in, and it was basically told that Ryan Pace could have this job, but if he hired this coach. And so now, number one, Ryan Pace hasn't had the ability to hire his own coach.
Right, that's important.
It's handed to him. Very important. Number two is, sure, they both have the same record, but what positives do you take away from John Fox's time here?
Improved defense is what I could think of, really.
And I can easily volley that to say that's Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio's fingers are all over that because John Fox is a 4-3 guy. They went to a 3-4. So I'm going to toss that mostly to Vic Fangio.
That's fair.
Ryan Pace, you can knock him for the signing of Marcus Cooper Sr., Marcus Wheaton, a lot of bad free agency, but you also have to say the guy drafted Jordan Howard, the guy drafted Tariq Cohen, he got Mitch Trubisky, he got Akeem Hicks. There's been a lot of positives, and I heard an interesting thing about his first draft class, and that at the time, because he was brought in later, he didn't have his team of scouts in there. He had to retain some scouts that were there to have some continuity and a full evaluation system. And he didn't have the full time to be able to go down and interview everybody he wanted to and do everything he wanted to. So it was a little bit of, flying blind, and you can't say, oh, well, we don't give him any fault for that first draft, but you also say, we'll look at the next two drafts, and they were pretty darn good. So, if it was that first one was the aberration, then, then maybe we've got a really good draft evaluator on our hands. So there's positives with Ryan Pace, and also you can't judge a guy until you see him bring in his own head coach and go from there. And if Ryan Pace, new head coach, stinks on ice and we get more 3-4 win seasons, then yeah, he deserves to be fired too.
I couldn't have said it any better. I think everything that you said is incredibly important, and I don't think enough people know about some of that, and it's good that you brought that up. And frankly, it makes me feel a little more confident that Pace is going to make the right decision here, because Pace never, ever, ever came off to me as like a dope or someone who doesn't know what they're doing. Granted, we don't hear from Ryan Pace very much, but when he does talk, it's not great. Like, his presser wasn't great, but he doesn't show me that he doesn't know anything about football. I just think that right now if you look at his presser, he avoided a lot of questions. He kind of deflected things in another direction. To me, it just kind of says that a lot of the questions that were asked can't really be answered yet because the appropriate moves or searching hasn't been fulfilled yet. So he still doesn't really appear to me as a dumb guy at all. And though that presser had some awkward moments in it and he might not be the best public speaker, I think you got to realize those circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people that are terrible public speakers, but they're really good at the topic that they're speaking about, and they really understand it, and they're really smart people. So I don't care about public speaking, whatever. And as long as you're not a bumbling idiot up in the mic, it's I'm fine with it. And so look, he was awkward up there, and he was awkward up at the mic, and having certain other people from the organization at the presser was a little disheartening, but I like a lot of things Ryan Pace has done.
Yeah, and I agree. And look, at the time when I was watching the presser, the nervousness, that all stuff, the awkwardness was concerning me at first, kind of in the moment. But as I thought about it more, and as I thought about what the circumstances more, I mean, the guy was stepping up to the podium just after he'd fired his head coach of 3 years. I mean, we all knew he was going to be fired, and I'm sure he was prepared to make this speech for a while, but still, you just fired the guy, you're about to start a search, and there's so much more that's left to be done. It's kind of hard to answer some of those questions. And I get there's some things that GMs just don't want to say out loud. I get that. That's fine. There are a few things that I liked what Ryan Pace said. I think that it's pretty clear that they're on the same path that they were when they drafted Trubisky. Nothing's changed there. Really, all in all, when I look at his presser, there's nothing that really was surprising to me. It's like basically everything he said is what we already know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the only disheartening thing is, why is Ted Phillips got to be involved?
Yeah.
The only way I want him involved in this coaching search is Ryan Pace saying, this is the guy I want to hire. I talked to him. He wants to come here, work out a contract. That's it. It's the only part of him I want him involved.
The collaborative effort thing. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ted Phillips doesn't know football at all. He might know football less than the McCaskey family. And he's a money guy. And I don't even know how good of a money guy he is, because he might have just come into the Bears at the right time. He came in at a time when the NFL took this huge leap in revenue because of TV money. And so he made the McCaskey family a lot of money. Maybe that just might have been coincidence of timing.
Well, I mean, keep in mind, he is the one responsible for what they did to Soldier Field and the fact that they still do not own Soldier Field and they rent it from the Park District, and Soldier Field lacks in so many different things and areas. But, I'm not going to go far into that. But, I mean, my overall point here is Ted Phillips should not be even close to those interviews. George McCaskey should not be even close to those interviews. I don't want Ryan Pace interviewing someone and having those two breathing down their neck as they're waiting for the key magic words that set them into glee, aka, I love Bears tradition. Bears tradition is great. Remember Walter Payton and all those. I want to be part of Bears tradition, because that'll make George all giddy and happy. No. And just, I know this is going to be Ryan Pace's ultimate decision, but I don't want any of that around him.
Yeah, I don't want any input from the peanut gallery. Is the only input you should have is negotiating the contract. That's the only input. I don't care. Right. Ryan Pace should go in there and interview the guys, make the decision of who he wants, make it happen, and then Ted Phillips, you sign the check. That's it.
Yeah, and what does that tell a GM that he needs to be babysat by his owner and president. I mean, it's the job of a general manager to take care of this on his own and get the trust of his superiors. I mean, what does that tell you?
That we have a busybody ownership. And I think it was Dan Hampton that came out and said that the McCaskey family doesn't know anything about football. It's true. They don't. They own a team.
No.
Is their grandfather / father, depending on who you're talking about, was a great football man, built this team from nothing, and you inherited it. You won the lucky lottery. That's it.
It was supposed to go to his son too. That's the other thing.
So this is just you lucked into who you are. This has nothing to do with your talent or skill, and you're bad at what you do. This team makes money for your family, but it is not a winning organization. It hasn't been in some time. Even the year you went to the Super Bowl, it was fluky. It was fluky.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the closest they've been to since 1985 was then. I mean, look at the era starting pretty much in 1990 when the last of the 85 Bears were starting to move on. Dicko was going to move on. So everything that was kind of left of the Hallis regime, if there was any remnants, was pretty much gone. Since then, you've had, 5 playoff appearances, 1 trip to the Super Bowl, 1 other trip to the NFC Championship, and that was really it.
Yeah, it's been bad. I mean, you're not too far ahead of the Cleveland Browns, to be honest with you.
No, I mean, people are calling the Bears now the Browns of the NFC.
You earned it. You earned that title. So
yeah.
So yeah, that's my concern is we're going to get input from 2 dipshits, and it should be Ryan Pace's decision.
It should be. I mean, leave this stuff to the football people. I don't know what else to say. I don't know how else I can put it. Leave it to the football guys. Ted Phillips, you're the business guy. Stay where you need to be. McCaskey, you're the owner. Just, you're the owner. Be the owner. And let the GM you hired do his job on his own because that is his damn job.
Yeah, agree with you. I think everybody agrees with you except for Ted Phillips and McCaskey's. I think they're the only people, and they're the ones who make the decision whether or not they're going to meddle. And it's sad because I'm sorry, go ahead. You've got pretty much a captive audience here. Bears fans are going to be loyal. They're going to keep coming back. They're going to keep, but eventually, you're going to start seeing that next generation not care. Think about it. We're pretty darn close to Packer country. I know my cousin and his wife are diehard Bears fans. Their son's a Packer fan.
I'm telling you, Packers fans are slowly starting to take over the Chicago football landscape. I really believe that. I think you're already seeing it.
Kids, when I grew up, luckily I grew up with the 85 Bears. So it was like I grew up and there was the winning team. So it was easy. But it's if you don't have a history with a team, I can see why, you sort of want to root for a winner. And if your team has just been a loser your whole life, well, you're just going to get made fun of by kids because first the cool kid's going to be a Packer fan, and then all the people are going to start, following the cool kid and being Packers fans, and eventually you're just going to get made fun of, even though you're in the Chicagoland area, for being a Bears fan. And until they start winning,
I know plenty of Chicago-born Packers fans that are my age or younger. Like it's kind of scary.
Yeah, and the thing is George McCaskey will talk about, I walked down to the South parking lot and blah, 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 and I saw the fans. Yeah, you saw 40, 50-year-old, 60-year-old fans. Go in 10 years, and you're going to see less and less people. Luckily, we have a small stadium, but you're going to see is viewership. The Bears had one of the lowest television viewerships of any NFL team this season. I just read that.
That's sad.
It's really sad.
That's really sad.
It's,
It should never happen to this team.
we're in the third biggest market. We should have, even when a bad team, we should have great viewership numbers.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because the Cubs were the lovable losers for so long, but that identity was so owned that they still maintained the viewership. But I think the circumstances were a little different with them, where the Bears, no one wants to root for that, where the Cubs, you had kind of the Wrigley Field charm and the Harry Carey for so many years throughout all the bad, that they were still able to maintain their status as being a cash cow, even through all the years of losing, where this Bears team that's foundation is on winning, if you're not getting results, people are going to slip away.
Well, just think about this. Ask yourself, would you, if your team is a loser, wouldn't you rather go out and support a game when it's 85 degrees and sunny and you can get drunk with all your friends in the middle of the afternoon versus going out and supporting a losing team when you're sitting in 10-degree weather and you can't feel your face anymore?
Yeah, that's also a good point. That's also a very good point, which brings me to something else. I'll try to make this brief. I wrote an article the other week about the missed opportunity in the early 2000s. Do you know what that missed opportunity I am thinking of? Do you have any guess?
Building a dome when they renovated the stadium?
Boo, correct.
Yeah, it was so dumb. It was so dumb.
Look at Detroit. Look at that palace that they play in. Even when the Lions were the laughing stock of sports, they still got great attendance there. I mean, that stadium is so nice. There's so much to do in there. There's so much to experience there. You have that ability, but not at Soldier Field.
No, because it's Arctic. It's so cold. My daughter's like, every time we drive by, she's like, I want to go to a game. And I was like, well, we'll have to go to preseason. And I'm like, because it's way too cold.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit, preseason in that stadium, the weather can be pretty nice, but I think the whole bear weather thing is so overrated, and I think most people would absolutely love to sit in a nice climate-controlled dome that's much bigger and has access to much more modern amenities and is easier to get to and is easy to access bathrooms, even if you're sitting up in the nosebleeds. I think that was a huge blunder on the Bears' part. I don't know if they were trying to pull the whole BS of trying to preserve tradition, because there's certainly no tradition in that stadium, because the Soldier Fields that the 85 Bears played on, that stadium's gone, man. It doesn't exist anymore. It's gone.
And also think about it is, a lot of the players that you sign are from Texas and Florida and somewhere in the South. They don't like to play in the cold. They don't want to play in the cold at all.
Well, wasn't Alshon Jeffrey? Wasn't there talks of him not liking Chicago because of the weather?
Yeah, Vic Fangio, there's talk of him not wanting to be here because he doesn't like the cold weather. That's why he sits in the booth.
Right. And now I know people will bring up, oh, well, the Packers play outside. The Packers play outside. Well, at least the Packers have a good team, or at least, an amazing quarterback to make them look like a good team. At least they get winning results. It's one thing to play in the cold on a winning team that's experienced a lot of success lately than doing the same thing in a much lesser stadium and a much lesser team.
Yeah, go sit outside. It's like 10 degrees outside right now. Go sit outside and just sit there with your arms crossed and a scowl on your face for 3 hours.
It's miserable. Those Bears games are miserable.
Now go out there and with your best friend and start high-fiving and cheering and jumping up and down. A lot more tolerable. Tolerable. I remember one year I went to a Bears game. They were playing the Houston Texans. And my buddy, his grandparents had season tickets from like way back, and they've been in their family forever. And his grandparents, they just decided they don't want to go anymore. So they passed the season tickets on to his parents. So his parents went for a long time, and they're like, we can't hang with the cold weather. So they go to the preseason games and they go to the first half of the season. And then my buddy and his brother go once it comes, like November, December. They go to those games. And he took me one game, it was playing Houston, and the Bears just stunk. They couldn't move the ball on offense. There wasn't much offense at all. And everyone was just sitting there. It was just quiet. And it was.
Was that the game in 2012?
I think this game must have been 2008 or 9.
Oh, okay.
And it was freezing. And everyone was just miserable. And they announced at halftime, they were like the temperatures, and then they were like Chicago, 3 degrees. Or they're like Green Bay, 3 degrees. And they're like Chicago, making it the coldest game of the NFL season, 2 degrees. And the crowd erupted and started yelling, Green Bay sucks, Green Bay sucks. Even though they were playing the Houston Texans. And I was like, suddenly the game got bearable. But then they went back to the game and it was just miserable. And everyone was freezing. And the place was half empty by the time, there was 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I was just like, make it conducive for fans to want to be there. You want fans to buy a nice jersey or a shirt or a sweatshirt, make it warm enough for people to see it. Otherwise, you're going out there in camouflage overalls and a parka and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, I look at what Minnesota just built. That place is an absolute palace. I want something like that.
I had to, for my old job, I had to go up to Minneapolis all the time, like twice a month. And I used to stay right by where they're building it. And it is really nice. And they would show a lot of pictures on the news, on the local news. And I was like, wow, this is really fantastic. And when I'd be up there and it was like, colder up there than it is down here. And you're like, man, just think of watching a football game inside.
And just having an arena that's big enough to host the Super Bowl, the Big Ten, many other events at any time of the year you want, even though you're in a cold environment. I mean, look at the Super Bowl. It's going to be hosted in Minnesota, but you can do it with that stadium.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen Lucas Oil Field in Indianapolis. It is really
also
nice.
Very nice.
Really nice. And it's a dome, and they can have the Super Bowl there. And don't you think the NFL would love to have the Super Bowl in Chicago?
Yes, that's kind of what I've been saying all along. You're in Chicago. You see the Super Bowl in every other big market but Chicago because the stadium is not domed and it's too small.
Yeah, so the two biggest factors for getting a Super Bowl is it's too small and it's too cold. You're not going to get a Super Bowl in Chicago until you have a brand new stadium and it's a dome and it's bigger. And
just imagine how cool it would be to have a Super Bowl here.
Oh, I know. It would be absolutely awesome. I mean, when we had the draft here, it was super awesome. I went down there.
It was, yeah.
And the people I ran into, I ran into Jerome Bettis. I just ran, I was.
Oh, really?
I had to go down there for work, and I was waiting in the hotel lobby for the person I was having a meeting with, and I turn and there's Jerome Bettis standing there, and I was like, "Hey, can I get a picture?" And he goes, "Hurry up." I also saw Larry Fitzgerald. I saw the head coach of Ohio State football. He was wearing coaching shorts and he was in coaching garb. That's what he wears when he's not in a suit. I saw several other people too, and I was like, "Wow, this is just awesome." They're just all down here.
Now imagine that, but in the biggest game of the year, the biggest sporting event of the year. Imagine that.
Well, we're not going to have it. At least not for another 20 years.
Yeah, because isn't the lease on Soldier Field forever?
I think it's another 18 years.
That sounds about right.
But getting back to our are coaching candidates is, so they've already interviewed Fangio. They've already interviewed Steve Wilkes, the coordinator, defensive coordinator for the Panthers. Today, they interviewed Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels. They flew out to Boston to interview him. And he's a really interesting candidate because first of all, you look at how many seasons he spent with Bill Belichick. And a lot of that just has to rub off on how you run an organization, how you deal with players, how you game plan, how you do all of these things.
And just being part of a winning environment.
Yeah. His history with Tom Brady, his history with coaching a very successful offense, all of these things is just really positive. But then you go, well, what happened in Denver? What happened there? Because that was a disaster. What does he learn from that? And
yeah, it was.
And if you're Ryan Pace, like, you've got to be frank. You got to sit down and go, what the hell happened there? And how are you going to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, because he was 11-17 in 2 seasons of the Broncos. Because wasn't he right before John Fox?
Yeah. So that'd be funny if, that relationship there, one getting fired, one getting hired, 2 different places.
Yeah. And he was also head coach of the Broncos when they traded Jay Cutler. Just a little fun factoid.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. And you also wonder how much of control over the 53-man roster he would want. And if you're Ryan Pace, you don't really want to give that up. If you want to give input and have control over the 90-man roster when you're in training camp, okay, that's one thing. But then having control over the 53 that's bordering into GM territory.
Right. And I think that was kind of one of the big debates during the Fox era, is that there was kind of the power struggle, thinking, all right, is Pace influencing this? Is Fox influencing this? I think clarity and kind of a clear idea of who's going to do what is kind of important for this coach search. And I'm pretty confident that Ryan Pace understands that.
Yeah, hopefully he's, comfortable enough in this job where he says, no, that's not going to happen. And he makes sure to know that this coach, that he's the one that's the GM and that coach is the coach.
Right.
Next candidate that got interviewed today was Pat Shurmur, the Vikings offensive coordinator. He's the guy I like the most, honestly. Very offensive minded. He's done a great job with the Eagles, the Rams, the Vikings as offensive coordinator. He was the interim coach after Chip Kelly got fired with the Eagles. And he's done so much, done a lot with a little. Think about what he's done with his 3rd string quarterback, his 3rd string running back, and has made this a pretty darn good offense. He goes in and games plans actually for each game, and really comes out with a good game plan. You like what Pat Shurmur has done?
Yeah, he's definitely someone I like as well. And for the reasons you said, I mean, look at the way he does the offense up in Minnesota. He takes these string guys, he spreads out the game plan, like you said, and he makes it work.
Yeah, and he has head coaching experience. He was the Browns head coach for a couple of seasons, and I know that's a knock on him because he went 9-23 while he was there. And again, that's going to be a situation where you ask him what happened and what did you learn. But if you think about the Browns, is number one, 9-23 is actually a pretty good record for the Browns.
For the Browns, yeah.
And number 2 is Bill Belichick failed as the Browns head coach.
Yeah, I think the whole what happened with the Browns thing is kind of overblown because, simply put it, it's the Browns. I don't think anyone can save the Browns.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to explain what the hell happened in Cleveland than it is what happened in Denver.
Absolutely. A winning team, an organization that's used to winning, that's had multiple Super Bowls and multiple Super Bowl runs to there. You're definitely right on that one, because it's like, well, the Browns, they just look like they're cursed, man. I mean, everyone who goes there fails. And like you said, Belichick was there, and look where he is now. So that's definitely a good point to bring up.
Yeah, and the coach right after you in Denver went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go.
And tomorrow's they're interviewing two candidates. The first one is the Eagles quarterback coach, John DeFilippo, and he's the one I'm hearing the rumors, like the substantiated rumors from actual professional beat writers. They're saying that is the one that they're hearing Ryan Pace is leaning towards, which is interesting because he's probably the least experienced of the coaches.
Right. I was just thinking the same thing. You would think that if you're trying to build up a team, you would want someone with more coaching experience, like a coordinator or a former head coach.
Yeah, and the interesting part of it is, you look at him, and he's got barely any coaching or play calling experience. His only real play calling experience was in 2015 with Cleveland Browns and Johnny Manziel. So that's really a bad sample size and a bad team to be, judging it on. He's only 39, has no head coaching experience, but you look what he's done. He was involved in the turnaround of Carson Wentz. I mean, Carson Wentz had a decent rookie year, but went from decent rookie year to MVP candidate. He was involved in that turnaround. He was involved in making that leap with Derek Carr from, late first round draft pick, or was he early second round? He's right on that cusp into just a absolutely awesome quarterback. He boosted David Fales into an NFL quarterback as a no-name from San Diego State. And he coached up Mark Sanchez all the way to an AFC championship game in 2009. So the guy knows how to teach quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably why Pace is interested. That would probably explain it, because honestly, I don't know much about the guy, but the resume you just read, I mean, that explains probably why he's interested.
And he's a guy that I've heard some people say, well, why don't you bring him in as your offensive coordinator and hire somebody like a Pat Shurmur or somebody that has more experience? But the problem is John DeFilippo, he's here for 1 year, and it's like a Adam Gase, and he's going to be gone.
Right.
He's never spent more than 3 years at any job. So if you don't lock him up as your head coach, he's going to be gone. And he's the guy that if the Bears were to bring him in, guys that have been in the league for a long time know other coaches. They know who they can poach from. They have ideas of who they want in mind. So if they were to hire like a Pat Shurmur's been around long enough to know other guys, but a John DeFilippo is not. He's a guy that you can be like, here's Vic Fangio. We can hand him to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a good marriage.
Yeah, all good points. Like I said, I didn't really know much about him because of the reason that he hasn't really had much of that coaching experience, but as kind of as a coordinator or a head coach, but as what you say was a quarterback's coach. And yeah, I mean, he's had some impressive stuff on there from what you read. So, I see why the interest is there, but yeah, you'd pretty much have to lock him up as a head coach. I'd love him on a staff, but you're absolutely right.
And then tomorrow, they're also going to be interviewing the Chiefs offensive coordinator, Matt Nagy. And he's an interesting one, too, is because he's only 39 as well. He has barely any play calling experience. I think this is his first year of play calling experience. But he comes from this Andy Reid tree of coaching. Bill Belichick might be one of the best coaches ever, but his coaching tree pretty much sucks. There's a lot of failed guys. But Andy Reid has had Ron Rivera, John Harbaugh, Todd Bowles, Leslie Frazier, Steve Spagnuolo, Brad Childress, Pat Shermer. That's all from the Andy Reid coaching tree. So it's a much more accomplished coaching tree. And Matt Nagy has followed him along from Philadelphia to Kansas City and has worked his way up from a ball boy all the way up to the offensive coordinator. And when the midseason, when the Chiefs were just absolutely playing like garbage, is he took over the play calling at that point. And I don't think they've lost a game since he started taking over the play calling. And he has made a dink and dunk passer like what's his name, Alex Smith, and really challenged him to stretch the field, pass downfield.
Look at
He's
Smith's
an interesting one
numbers
as well.
recently. They're pretty solid.
Yeah, and he's been a guy that just dinks and dunks and is a game manager. So
Plays smart.
He's a dark horse for me. I still like Pat Shermer is my guy, but there's a lot of really good candidates here. This has not been a situation where they've pulled somebody out of the woodworks like, oh, we're going to bring in this weirdo from Canada.
Yeah. Don't remind me of that.
But they're talking about that. There's rumors that they're going to interview Pete Carmichael, the offensive coordinator for the Saints, who doesn't call plays. So Sean Payton calls the plays, but he's a longtime offensive coordinator. And George Edwards, the defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. And I've heard rumors that they will interview Dave Tobe, the former or the current special teams coordinator for the Chiefs and former special teams coordinator for the Bears, who was responsible for Devin Hester.
Yeah, always a little soft spot for him, I guess, right? I'm not as sure about that one, but, who am I to evaluate, right? I think he was one of the first names that I really heard about in serious talks was Dave Tobe. At least from my perspective, that was one of the first I've heard.
I think Dave Tobe would be a fantastic head coach. I don't think he fits for the Bears.
Right, that's the whole thing.
But not for the Bears, but I think that would have been a fantastic job for Cincinnati if they didn't botch that up and bring back Marvin Lewis from retirement.
Absolutely.
But there's going to be a team that's going to really get a good head coach. And people are like, well, he's a special teams coach, not a defensive or an offensive guy. But here's a list of special teams coordinators that have gone on to do pretty good things. John Harbaugh, Mike Ditka, Marv Levy, Bill Belichick. They did well for themselves.
They did all right. They did all right, I guess.
Some of those other guys may not be accomplished, but Marv Levy went to 4 straight Super Bowls.
Yeah, he did, didn't he?
I jest, everyone did a lot in that group, but try going to 4 Super Bowls. The Bills were a fantastic team. They were just a very, very good team. They pretty much ran into a buzzsaw every one of those years. But to try going to 4 straight Super Bowls, that really is. And that team doesn't get the respect that they're owed because they didn't win any of them. But they're one of the best teams ever assembled.
Yeah, it's too bad that that's their legacy, is known for losing 4 straight Super Bowls. And that really is something sad. But man, they were close to winning some of those, and they really were impressive. But could you imagine being a Buffalo fan and that happening? You'd think if you made 4 straight Super Bowls, you'd win at least one, right?
And the odds are with
exactly.
Barring any kind of weirdness, I think one of these guys is going to be your head coach. And my pick would be Pat Shermer, but I'm really thinking that it's going to be John DeFilippo. And I think that can work, but I think you got to do like they did with Sean McVay, is surround him with experienced veteran staff. Don't send him out there. Like there was a lot of downfalls from Mark Trestman, but the big one is if you look at every single person on his staff, there was nobody there that had done a higher job. Like, if you look at Minnesota, they've got like 4 former head coaches on their staff. The Bears, when during the Trestman era, everybody that was doing a job, it was at least one step up from any job they've ever done. So everybody was new at that coaching position. And that's troubling. That's real troubling. So if you're going to bring in a guy that's going from quarterback coach all the way to head coach, it's been done. There's precedence to it. And you can be successful, but you have got to surround him with caliber guys who've been there before. You pair him with a Vic Fangio. You bring in veteran guys. You bring in somebody that's been an offensive coordinator before, and really put a good staff around him. And you've got to guide him a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more name I wanted to ask you about. Just out of curiosity, what do you think of Frank Reich?
He's interesting. I can't get a good beat on him because he's paired with a very, very good quarterback coach, and he's got a very offensive-minded head coach. So it's really hard to gauge what his ability is. And I'm not hearing his name tossed around as a head coach for any of the handful of openings.
And that really surprises me because people have been talking about him in other instances about head coaching jobs.
I think it's been the media that's been talking about it, but you're not hearing actual interviews. And the Bears have bypassed him. I know he's a little bit older. He's in his 50s. Then, because the hot thing is getting a Sean McVay 30-year-old guy. So he's a little bit older, but still, if the Eagles still look great next year on offense, I think you'll see people start interviewing him. But I think people are a little concerned because they see a really hotshot upstart underneath him and a good offensive mind with a resume above him. And he's kind of in between, sandwiched.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, he kind of has caught my eye of attention, and I am kind of interested in him. But, those are fair points as well. I mean, he's got a pretty solid resume. He's coached Peyton Manning, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz. Eagles were third in the NFL with 22.6 points per game this season. But to the points you said, this is Wentz's second year, and he really came out blazing. And we'll kind of see what happens in the future. But I'm kind of interested in him. Nobody else really I could think of that we haven't talked about. Obviously, people will still bring up the Jim Harbaugh stuff, but I just rule that out. That's not happening.
He's said like multiple times, I'm not coming back. So stop. I'm coaching Michigan.
Just once and for all, put him behind.
Yeah, I mean, people just keep tying to him because he does have this like loyalty. So he's a Michigan man. He wanted to turn that program around. So they're saying, well, once he turns that around, maybe he'll want to come to the Bears and turn that program around too. But calm down. Let him get done what he wants to get done in Michigan first before you're just packing him off. Yeah, there's a 0% chance he comes to the Bears as the head coach.
It's not happening.
Plus, can you imagine the press conferences with him on a regular basis?
Oh boy,
like, he's a good football coach, but he is a weirdo.
He is.
So the last thing I want to talk about the Bears is right now, as it stands, per overthecap.com, which is a site I like to use for draft or for a cap analysis. The Bears have $42.27 million in cap room for this coming season, which is a lot of money. But if you make a couple of moves, which are very reasonable, you cut Mike Glennon, you cut Pernell McPhee, you cut Bobby Massey, You cut Marcus Wheaton, you cut Marcus Cooper Sr., and you cut Jarrell Freeman, which not the talent thing, but think about it, he still has that 10-game suspension.
Right.
So he's not going to be able to play most of next year anyway. You have $81.9 million in cap space.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. But then you think about it is these are some of your key free agents on your own team. Prince Amukamara, Dontrell Inman, Kyle Fuller, Kendall Wright, Christian Jones, Lamar Houston, Sam Acho, Josh Bellamy, Bryce Callahan, Cameron Meredith, Pat O'Donnell. So you've got a lot of guys that you still need to sign.
And I don't think a lot of those guys are going to be necessarily expensive.
Cornerbacks might be a little bit, but the good thing is this is actually a pretty deep free agent class of cornerbacks.
Which is
not a lot of elite guys.
But still, we need some depth.
But there's a lot of guys that Pro Football Focus ranks as above average. So the only elite guy they have is Patrick Robinson from Philadelphia. They have him as absolutely elite. But you've got Prince Amukamara, who's above average, Kyle Fuller, Nikel Roby-Coleman from the Rams. He's like borderline elite. EJ Gaines from Buffalo, Ross Cockrell from the Giants, Malcolm Butler from the Patriots, TJ Carey from Oakland, Byron Maxwell from Seattle, all above average cornerbacks. So that's right there is just the above average guys that are under 30. So there's, like 10, 12 guys right there. So there's going to be people that you can sign, and you've got a lot of cap room, and you've already had two of them in your building. So I could reasonably see both Fuller and Amukamara coming back.
Yeah, and I think Fuller's probably the one that's going to get a pretty decent payday after last year. And it was interesting, during the presser, I believe, I can't remember who asked it, but if I remember correctly, somebody did ask about Kyle Fuller.
Yeah, and you got to think that you want him back, and it sucks that they didn't pick up his fifth-year option because they would have him for this coming season and not have to worry about it. They would have him for like $2 million a year. But, it is what it is. I read the story about how Vic Fangio challenged him to be better, and he did it over golf. And he's like, yeah, Kyle didn't like getting his ass kicked at golf.
Yeah, really.
But the wide receiver situation is the one that's really scary because you didn't have a very good wide receiver core this year. Cam Meredith is a free agent. Dontrell Inman is a free agent. Kendall Wright and Josh Bellamy are all free agents. So basically, who you have in contract for next year is Marcus Wheaton and Kevin White.
I mean, I'm kind of the opinion that they should move on from Kevin White, but that's just me.
But, and the wide receiver crop is not that good.
No.
I mean, Terrell Pryor has had really good seasons, but he got a 1-year prove-it deal this year and kind of stunk. So he's a guy that has a lot of talent that you could probably get a reasonable contract. Sammy Watkins had a pretty good year. Taylor Gabriel from Atlanta was okay. Then you got Dontrell Inman, Kendall Wright, Cam Meredith, all from your own team. Martavis Bryant, who's kind of an anomaly. Jarvis Landry, who's going to command a big salary. You got Paul Richardson from Seattle, who's an interesting one. And Allen Robinson from Jacksonville, who's very good, but he's coming off of a major knee injury. You don't know what you're going to get out of him. And then the last one who's really interesting to me is, especially if you're got a young quarterback and you're going to have a new crop of wide receivers, is Mike Wallace. Mike Wallace is over 30, so he's not going to get all kinds of deals. But he's quietly had a really good year for Baltimore this year.
Yeah, he has.
So he's like an interesting one because, you could bring him in as a solid veteran that helps develop a young wide receiver core and helps steady the things for a young quarterback. Because that's part of it is, you want to bring a stud wide receiver in for a young quarterback, but you also want to have a steady veteran because when the quarterback and the wide receiver have their ups and downs as young players, is you want to have that guy that's going to steady the ship.
Oh yeah, you need some experience in there.
And Mike Wallace can do that. And you think this league has kind of ridden out the badness out of him, and now he's just, he kind of knows his place in the league. When he left Pittsburgh, he was full of piss and vinegar and realized that the world wasn't his oyster, and kind of hit the bottom and came back up and he's found his place now. And I think that could be good for Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, and you can reasonably have him as the veteran presence who can still produce. Obviously, probably not produce at Pro Bowl levels, but can still decently produce.
Yeah, and another interesting spot for where the Bears have a need is edge rusher.
Big time.
And there's some serious edge rushers that are free agents. DeMarcus Lawrence with Dallas, Junior Galette from Washington, Ziggy Ansah, Sheldon Richardson, Alex Okafor, Coney Ely from the Jets, and a really, really interesting one that I really doubt the Bears would go after, but this might be a good selling point for bringing back Vic Fangio. Is Aldon Smith is a free agent, and he's now he's going to be off suspension. I think he's applying now to come back in the league, so he's due to come back, so he can play. Imagine having Aldon Smith and Leonard Floyd. You'd have a Vic Fangio licking his chops.
Yeah.
So, we did a lot of Bears talk, but it's, a lot of this is we're getting ahead of ourselves as free agency and all this stuff. But first we got to get a head coach.
Yeah, that's kind of important. And we'll just have to wait and see on that one.
I think the Bears will get one sooner rather than later.
Me too.
I think Brian Pace is going to make his mind up quickly and pull the trigger and try to get the guy he wants before. Luckily, a lot of the coaching vacancies have cleared up pretty quickly. So there's not as many teams as we thought trying to get coaches.
Yeah.
But still, he's going to want to get the guy he wants, just like he got the quarterback he wanted, and pull the trigger quickly.
Yeah, because what? We were thinking that there was going to be over 10 teams looking for a head coach, and it ended up only being, 6?
Yeah. Some teams ended up keeping their coach. I think there was some teams that were on the fence and realized this could really be bad if we fire our guy and there's 10 teams that need a coach, because there's not 10 candidates out there that are head coach worthy.
Right. So, who was to you the most surprising non-fire of this year? And don't count Marvin Lewis. That's a whole weird thing on its own. Not counting that.
The guy from Tampa Bay. I told you he wasn't going to get fired.
Yeah.
But I didn't say that out of he didn't deserve to be. It was, I just thought they had so much weirdness with their head coaching situation in the past. I thought they were going to give him another year, but I totally thought he deserved to get fired. And So that was to me was surprising because I just sort of picked him to not get fired, looking at the eyes of a weirdo franchise.
Well, it's funny. I picked him to get fired. You didn't. I picked Garrett not to get fired. You did, and he's still there. So a little kind of interesting thing there.
Yeah, that was one of a. I mean, there's gonna be turnover in Dallas. I didn't know how. I think I said that one. It was going to be who has a little more power, is Jerry Jones or his son? Because if it was his son was going to keep the coach, and Jerry I think would fire him. So that was a little bit of a weird one for me. So I'm not surprised they're keeping him. I wouldn't be surprised if they fired him. It was just depend on that dynamic.
Yeah, that's fair.
So which one is your strangest non-fire?
For me, I kind of have to go with Tampa Bay. I really thought that was going to be a firing, but it wasn't. Other than that, like, I'm not trying to count the Marvin Lewis thing because that was pretty bizarre.
How do you sell that to your fans? Hey, here's the guy that retired that was, hasn't won a playoff game in forever. And, we can go get somebody new and exciting and sell it to you. But instead, we just brought him back out of retirement and we lost our defensive coordinator.
Yeah, you ready to keep going down and down? Oh, but remember all those great 10-6 years where we didn't win a playoff game? Come on, those were great.
So, yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's another one.
The Detroit firing was weird.
Yeah, I didn't think he was going to get fired. A lot of Lions fans were actually happy about it. But, I mean, that guy kept that team competitive for a number of years now. He kind of brought the Lions from these big losers to kind of expecting to compete for the division. You saw what he did with Matt Stafford, and that was a little bit of a surprising. I also little surprised that who was it? Why am I blanking on his name? Wasn't surprised Todd Bowles stayed around. I picked him to stay around. Jay Gruden, I thought he was going to stay around.
Bruce Arians retiring surprised me.
That's what I was thinking of. Bruce Arians retiring. Thank you.
And that must have been when Greg Gabriel tweeted out that a veteran coach that had been with the team for a long time was looking for a change. Maybe it was Bruce Arians deciding to retire because it's a good time because Carson Palmer's retiring and that team is getting ready to, just be.
It's a retirement
bad.
home.
This team is going to be bad. They're going to be.
Yeah.
They're not going to be Cleveland Browns bad, but they might be New York Giants bad.
Oh, what do you think of the Denver Broncos situation?
I didn't think they should fire the head coach, and I'm glad they didn't. I think that would have been really bad, and that would have been hard to attract a coach if you're got Donald Trump as your GM and just fired everybody.
Yeah, you fired. The other one I wanted to ask about was what's your opinion on Hugh Jackson and the Cleveland Browns?
I mean, when they give you that quarterback to go with, what do you expect? What do you expect them to do?
That's what I'm saying.
You can't. How do you even judge Hugh Jackson? Is Judge Hugh Jackson now that you've got a new GM in who is not trying to play Moneyball, is going to actually try to draft, and you've got 2 top 5 picks, then you judge Hugh Jackson. I like Hugh Jackson. I'm glad he kept his job.
You fire him now and you start the process all over again. I mean, he's got nothing to work with.
Yeah, and I'm curious of what's going to happen with Detroit. They fired the head coach when both of his coordinators are people that have been tossed and their names tossed around as potential head coaches, and they're
especially Jim Bob Cooter.
Both of them, Terrell Austin too, is that what if they don't hire either one of those guys? They're just going to lose a coordinator because they're interviewing outside of the organization. They're not promoting one of them. So it's curious of what's going to happen there. There could be some big trouble, and I think that was a bad firing in Detroit.
I think so too. Like I said, a lot of people were happy about it, but I don't know. I thought that Caldwell did a lot of good things in Detroit. I really did.
Yeah, he made that's no longer a laughingstock franchise.
No, it's competing for the division or the playoffs every year, even when they don't go there. I mean, don't get me wrong, that loss against the Bengals to eliminate themselves from the playoffs was absolutely brutal, but look what he did with, like I said, look what he did with Matthew Stafford. And they don't really have much of a run game or anything else, but they still held in there without one. I just feel like if you gave Caldwell some more pieces, that he could take him back to the playoffs again.
I think so too. I think it's short-sighted. So we'll see. Because we're going long, I think we should kind of forego Blackhawks and Bulls, but I want to talk a little bit baseball.
Okay.
I kind of want to talk Sox first.
Yeah, there's a little news there.
Yeah, so they had a 3-team trade where they moved one of their farm system infielders, Jake Peter. And, I've heard some people say that they don't like moving when they're a team that's rebuilding to move their young farm teams or their farm help so early and not get a big haul back. And my thinking is, if you think about it like this, is he's a guy that was going to be blocked anyway. He's a middle infielder. He's blocked. He's got really young guys that are ahead of him. And so you're going to have to move him at some point anyway. He's not that high up your farm system. So if you don't think he's going to make that turn quickly, is you dump him. They ended up with 2 middle relievers who are veteran guys. So in the short term, they're going to help stabilize your bullpen and make you a little more competitive, because I think that bullpen is going to get taxed pretty hard this season.
Big time.
But also, you look a little deeper, is they also bring back $3 million cash, 2 from one team, 1 from the other. And they've only got a payroll of $65 million this season. And so you think that they're not going to sit on all this extra money. They're going to put it away for that moment when they have to do their signing of John Lester and their signing of, these guys, when the young players finally come up and they're ready to compete and they need that big time veteran guy. Is they have money in the coffers now, and every time they can put a few more million in there, that's a pro. Plus, once it comes trade deadline, they're not going to compete this year. I think they're going to be halfway decent. I predict I
agree.
Maybe 72 to 75 wins. But they're not going to.
I can see that.
Not going to make the playoffs. Is Soria and Avalon? You flip them at the trade deadline, and you bring back more trade chips.
Yeah, exactly. I think this was a fantastic trade for the Sox, and I think of the teams involved in this trade, the Sox came out the best because they got really good things that they could use now and to get for the future. Because my guess is Soria is going to be the closer, because they don't really have a closer right now. So it would make sense for him to be the closer. And if he has another good season, yeah, you trade him away for more stuff that you'll need for the future. And it's not like they traded away Jimenez or Moncada or anything in this. It was, like you said, a guy who was blocked, and I really didn't know much about him, honestly. So no, I think that was a trade well worth it.
Yeah, I mean, the people I've heard bitch and complain about it are guys that probably 2 weeks ago never even heard of him.
Probably.
I mean, he's not one of your top.
Jimenez, yeah, but not this guy.
Yeah, he's not one of your top guys. He's not one of the guys that's going to be on your team when you're competing for a World Series. That's not the guy you got. And Rick Hahn is a really smart baseball man. And right now, he knows he doesn't have the resources of the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Cubs or some of these other teams. So he's basically going out and he's buying wholesale and selling retail. And it's so smart. Guys that he thinks, he's like, well, they're not in our long-term plans, but we'll sign them or trade for them with things that we don't need, and we'll flip them later. It's, every time you can pick up extra draft picks and extra guys is just, winning.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that this is going to be a really, really, really good beneficial move for the White Sox for a while. I think when the White Sox are going to be competing, this is going to be one of those moves that they're going to look back and talk about in a good way. There's plenty of moves that the Cubs look back in a good way. I think this will be one of the moves that the Sox look back, and not necessarily the big blockbuster move like the Sale or Quintana, but there's always that small move that people talk about when you're competing. You're like, yeah, you remember that? That was kind of key to the competition here. And this could be one of those moves.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those two-step moves where, well, they got this guy by trading that guy for this guy and trading that guy. And that's where it's going to be. Right. I think this is going to be a smart move. And I really like what Rick Hahn is doing. And it's one of the slickest rebuilds I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, the Sox and their situation with the rebuild, because they had so many assets to trade, and they traded it for the right stuff. They didn't get shortened on any of these deals. Rick Hahn actually probably got more than people expected, especially for like Adam Meaton. This has been one of the smoothest rebuilds of any sport I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a diehard Cubs fan, but once this team finally comes to fruition, it's going to be hard not to root for them, because the way it was done and just watching it from seed into plant, it's going to be cool.
It's good for baseball.
Very good. But on the other side is we're like 5 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting, and you still have. Has Lance Lynn even signed anywhere?
Nope.
So like all the top pitchers have just not signed anywhere. And
I mean, the biggest pitcher move was Tyler Chatwood and Wade Davis.
Yeah, I mean, Wade Davis is a different animal. See, with the starting pitchers, yeah, Tyler Chatwood is the biggest one. But the Cubs still have their sights set on either Yu Darvish, Jake Arrieta, or Alex Cobb. And the Cubs are playing the waiting game, and I think it's going to pay off. Because right now it seems like it's a 2-team race for Jake Arrieta, and the Cubs offer is reportedly 4-year, $110 million, which is a far cry from 7-year, $200 million.
Oh, big time. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Alex Cobb is kind of interesting because I don't know if you heard the latest talk that he was offered 3 for $42, and Cobb's company denied it. I don't think he's worth any more than that, frankly. So I don't know. We'll see there.
I mean, what I guessed the Cubs would get him for is 3 and 45, 15 a year, and I thought that was generous. I think anything more than that is ridiculous. Even
I mean,
any more years or any more average yearly salary, I think is ridiculous.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, giving him 60 over 3, 20 million. Or $20 million a year. Come on. I like Alex Cobb as a 4 guy, but that's excessive.
Well, the funny part about it is I've heard that his management has scoffed at him asking for 20, but then it's kind of leaked out that they were asking for 18 or 19. So that's a little, come on now. Each of 19 is basically 20. And when you're like probably a 13, 14 a year guy, don't push your limits too hard. It's 5 weeks from training camp, and you still have Yu Darvish and Jake Arrieta out there.
I mean, for a guy who's played on a bad Tampa team for a while. For a guy who just had Tommy John, 3 years, $42 million, that would be a pretty nice payday for you, bud, especially if you're going to be like a 4-starter.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a contract I'm comfortable with. More than that, you're really pushing it.
Yeah.
But it's crazy to think that we're 5 weeks from pitchers and catchers reporting, and there's still like 2 or 3 handfuls of moves that the Cubs are still looking at. Number one, they're still looking at Yu Darvish. 2, they're still looking at Jake Arrieta. And my hope is that the Cardinals, with whatever resources they still have, are going to try to go for a closer and bullpen help over a starting pitcher, so that the Cubs are able to get him for, a reasonable contract.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at all the holes the Cardinals still have. And they were in the rumors of trying to trade for Donaldson, and they were all saying, no, the Blue Jays don't want to trade for him. There were links to Jake Arrieta. They've been linked to Eric Hosmer, who's getting ridiculous offers right now. Have you heard the offers for Eric Hosmer?
Oh my God. When I first heard, I turned on the radio and I heard the number, and I was like 7 years. Is it 7 years?
Yeah, 7 years.
Yeah. And I was thinking, man, is that for Yu Darvish? And then I was like, I pulled over. I was driving. And I pulled over, and I was like, I got to Google this. And I was like, oh, what the hell? That is not a legit contract for him.
Pretty ridiculous, because both the Royals and the Padres are offering those similar huge deals. I mean, they're kind of in a bidding war of ridiculousness right now.
Oh, well. But yeah, you hope that kind of everybody else, because there's only a handful of teams in baseball that have the money to throw around $100 million plus contract.
Yeah,
so
and even
Arrieta,
though there's the luxury tax issue as well.
Yeah, Arrieta's already with limited people, and both of us thought that a possibility was the Colorado Rockies, and I don't see that happening now that they signed Wade Davis to a big contract. I don't think they're going to go with
the most average pay per year for a reliever ever.
Yeah. So yeah, Arrieta is getting more and more likely that he might come back.
Yeah, it is. It's gone from completely doubting to possibly.
Yeah. And then you've got Alex Cobb still on the radar. Christian Yelich, who I would love to see in a Cubs uniform, just depending on the price. If we can get it on a steal deal, like we give up a Starlin Castro for him. Yeah, if we can get Christian Yelich, that would be interesting. But he's still on the Cubs radar. Lorenzo Cain, interesting one.
I just wrote about Lorenzo Cain. I don't know if you saw my article for Cubby's Crib.
I saw. I just haven't read it yet. But I heard Bruce Levine talking about that Lorenzo Cain is a possibility on the Cubs radar. And I was like, wow, that's actually a really interesting one, because he's not the Lorenzo Cain from, like 5-6 years ago, but in a right situation, that could be a nice rotational or like a outfield depth move. Yeah,
I mean, his on-base numbers are pretty good. He doesn't draw walks a whole lot, but he's decent. He's not really a slappy, prototypical leadoff guy. He's typically a 2-3 guy in the lineup, but really good defender in the outfield. So it's an interesting one. I just think the money may be a little bit, because a lot of people are projecting him to get in the 4-year range, not necessarily know the price, but if you're going to go 4 years for a position player, you're probably going to expect him to get paid some money.
Yeah. I mean, if you can get him on a shorter deal, worth it. I think 4 years he's going to be pretty long in the tooth for a guy that has relied a lot on his speed.
Yeah.
I still remember I saw a shirt and said like 70% of Earth is covered in water. The other 30% is covered by Lorenzo Cain. But I mean, can you imagine when you get a lead late in the game and you put Almora, Hayward, and Lorenzo Cain as your 3 outfielders?
That'd be something. That would be a lot of DRS right there.
Yeah, you're not going to get any cheap runs that way.
No, sir. No, sir.
Yeah, there's a lot of field being covered right there. One of the other interesting ones is the Cubs are interested in Greg Holland and Addison Reed.
Addison Reed is the guy I really like. I really would like Addison Reed in this bullpen. He's a guy you could play closer or setup. He's kind of versatile in the late innings there. I really want Addison Reed.
Yeah, I like that move too. And it's just interesting that he's still on the market right now. And it's so odd. This has got to be, I know for us fans, this is like the coldest hot stove league ever. But can you imagine how much work is going on with those GMs trying to get things done?
I can't imagine the stress.
Yeah, this has got to be just like a high stakes poker game right now with how many guys are still out there.
Yeah. I mean, they're frantically going here, and here and thinking about this, and this, while the fans are just sitting around bored out of our minds.
Yeah. And then the last 2 names, one has been mentioned for like a year plus now, is Chris Archer as a possible trade possibility. But the other one, it would be really interesting. I just don't see it happening, is Garrett Cole.
Yeah, I'd like it, but I really don't see it. But I'd like it.
Yeah, to trade within the division, I don't even want to imagine what you'd have to give up to get him. But I think he's got 2 years left. And he's a really good pitcher. And if you could put him, and he would be, what, your number 4?
Yeah. That'd be pretty darn good.
I mean, he was a number 1 on a playoff team, like recently. So imagine him being a 4. That's a hell of a 4 right there.
Yeah, it would. It would cost a lot, especially considering that it'd be a trade in division.
Yeah, I really don't see it happening, but if you're Jed and Theo, that's got to be on your radar, right? If
you have to at least
that
investigate,
pitcher of his caliber. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, though. It's funny because the Cubs really don't see the Pirates right now as a rival. And I don't think they've seen each other's rivals for a long time, because when the Cubs were bad and the Pirates were really good with Barry Bonds and Bobby Bonilla, they didn't look at the Cubs as competitors. They just kicked them around. And now when the Cubs are really good, they were looking at the Cardinals, not the Pirates. So for the Cubs, it's not really, they don't look at as a rival per se. It's like a division game, but not the biggest rival.
I do think that though your point is pretty accurate, I do think that the Pirates right now see the Cubs more of a rival than the Cubs see the Pirates as a rival, if that makes sense.
That's where I was getting to, is the Pirates are looking at this much differently than the Cubs are looking at it, where the Cubs are like, that's a division team and we could still make a trade with them. And then the Pirates are probably, gnashing their teeth going, I'm not trading with the Cubs.
Right.
So yeah, it's got to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably good. It's always worth to have a conversation, and that's probably what they're going to do. I mean, what's Cole's contract like? That's what I'm curious of.
I think I read earlier that he's got 2 years left at like $7 million per year.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's a nice contract for the Cubs.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're getting down to like 1 month for training or pitchers and catchers report. So, I'm curious to see how hard of ball Boris is going to play, because I think Boris would hold the Arrieta out until spring training was done, pretty much.
Yeah.
and trot him out for an opening game. If it meant getting his player a bigger contract, and I think Jed and Theo would play that Mexican standoff game with Boris. You just wonder how long Jake Arrieta is willing to sit there and go, I need a team. I need a team.
Right. Yeah. You got to be thinking that they all kind of want to get this settled soon. Clock's ticking away.
Yeah, it is going to be who breaks first.
Right.
But judging on how all of these major league GMs are going, it's probably going to be a player.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, Bulls playing okay. Nico, it wants to still be traded. Crawford hurt. Jeff Glass gets big shot to play and does well. Blackhawks out of playoffs. Bulls still 7th worst team in basketball. So we can mention them. But yeah, I don't have anything else I want to talk about. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap this up?
No, not really. I'm sure we'll have more stuff to talk about next week, but right now I think I've pretty much said my piece.
Yeah, so it's hopefully we have a Bears head coach soon, because I want to hit the ground running.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. But I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please make sure you subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube. Share with your friends. Follow us on social media at ShyFanPat1, at Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears! Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.